Hello everyone, welcome back to another video here. In today's video we got a couple of signings to talk about, a head coaching update with the Columbus Blue Jackets, plus some trade rumors involving the Flames, the Sharks, the Kings, and the Blue Jackets. And we'll go to all that coming up right now. Hello everyone, welcome back to another video here at the NHC channel. Before we get into the video, forget to like this video, subscribe down below. Thank you for your support when I'm able to help you guys. So if you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe button down below, and don't forget to leave a comment down in the comment section below so someone else discuss today's video. Now in this video, we're going to start off by discussing some signings from our past couple days. We had a couple of interesting signings. We did do a new UFA board on my blog. You guys can go check it out. I'll link it in the description down below. But I did do a new updated UFA list, and one of the guys who's on my new UFA list has been signed, and that was the player who was number 1 on my new UFA list, and that was Daniel Sprong. Sprong, who's a solid bottom 6 forward, has played really well the past couple of years in Seattle and Detroit, gets a 1-year contract with the Vancouver Canucks with a waive of $975,000 at the start of next year. Pretty good deal in my opinion for the Canucks. Sprong's a really good bottom 6 forward, can really work well with a team like the Vancouver Canucks and like their 4th line, can give them about 15 goals, 30 points, maybe a little bit more, so it's a pretty good pickup there for the Canucks to get Sprong, and I think that's a pretty good pickup there for Vancouver. Then we saw the Utah franchise sign one of their players to an ELC, and that's Cole Beaudoin. Beaudoin, who, if I'm correct, was the 24th overall pick in this past year's draft, gets a 3-year ELC with a $975,000. Looks like eventually could be a really good player there for the Utah franchise. He's a center, so he looks like a pretty good player, and I think eventually could be a solid middle 6 forward there for the Utah franchise, so pretty good pickup there for Utah to sign Beaudoin. The New Jersey Devils signed one of their RFAs in Santeri Hataka, gets a 1-year league minimum deal, had a pretty good season last year over in the AHL after being acquired as part of the Meyer trade a couple of years ago, so looks like he should be a solid 8th, 9th defenseman for that team, and could be a call-up option if they run into some injuries. So solid sign there for the Devils. The Minnesota Wild signed Graham Clark. He gets a 1-year deal with a view of $800,000. Clark was the guy who the Wild acquired from the New Jersey Devils in exchange for Adam Beckman, so pretty good to see both those guys get 1-year deals now, and both those guys are signed, both Beckman and Clark, in their new organizations, so pretty good stuff there. And then we saw 2 players who would file for salary arbitration settle before the arbitration case. First, it was Connor Dewar, who gets a 1-year, $1.18 million deal to not go to arbitration. Pretty good deal there for the Leafs. He's a solid bottom 6 forward. That's pretty good money for a bottom 6 forward. So pretty good solid sign there for the Leafs. Meanwhile, Malenstyn, who was acquired a little while ago by the Buffalo Sabres from the Washington Capitals, signs a 2-year deal with the Buffalo Sabres with an AAV of $1.35 million. So he's a solid bottom 6 forward too. And once again, pretty good money for a bottom 6 forward. And I think eventually Malenstyn should be a solid player there for the Sabres. So pretty good solid signings there. We see Malenstyn signed, so he's not going to go to arbitration. Dewar signed, so he's not going to go to arbitration. And Buffalo and Toronto get deals for bottom 6 forwards locked up. You also see Graham Clark signed an extension in Minnesota. Hataka signed an extension in New Jersey. Sprong signed a new deal in Vancouver. And Beaudoin signed a new deal in Utah. So interesting stuff there from over the past couple of days. Going over to a coaching update with the Columbus Blue Jackets, they have officially hired their new head coach, which is the last head coach that needs to be signed right now. And that's the Columbus Blue Jackets signing Dean Evason. Now there was some talk about Todd McLellan. I heard some talk about Pascal Vincent going back. I heard some talk about some other names too, but Evason is the one who ends up getting the new contract to be the new head coach of the Columbus Blue Jackets. Pretty good hiring there for the Jackets. Evason does have head coaching experience. He was the head coach in the AHL for a couple of years with the Milwaukee Admirals, so he had a long stint there. He was in the assistant head coach from 2018 to 2020 with the Minnesota Wild. Then in 2020, he was named the interim head coach with Minnesota, and then later on that year, his interim tag was taken off, and he became the new head coach of the Minnesota Wild. He was the head coach of the Minnesota Wild until this past year, November 27th, 2023, when he was fired. So he had a couple of seasons with the Minnesota Wild. Wasn't able to get them very far in the playoffs, but he definitely was able to help them become a really strong team. This team hadn't made the playoffs for quite some time, and now they missed it this year. So interesting stuff there, and now he's been hired to be the new head coach of the Columbus Blue Jackets. So it's pretty good stuff there for Evason. It's good to see he gets a new coaching opportunity. So interesting stuff there. They had a lot of options the Jackets did to pick from. They had McLellan, Woodcroft. Like we said, they could have stayed with Vincent, but they go with Evason. So it's a pretty good pickup there for the Jackets, and I think this could help steer them in the right direction. So interesting hiring there, but I think Evason is maybe not the greatest of choices, but it's definitely the right choice in my opinion for the Columbus Blue Jackets. So interesting hiring there. And lastly, going over to a couple of trade rumors. First, with the San Jose Sharks. According to Sheng Peng of the San Jose Hockey Now, he says that the Sharks are still looking to try and add a defenseman. He says that there's some free agents that they're looking at. He says says that there are some trade options they're looking at, but they really do want to try and add some more help on the defensive end. If you look at the free agent market, he links guys such as Justin Schultz, John Klingberg, Kevin Shattenkirk, and Tyson Barrie, all to sound like the Sharks still have a ton of cap space, so they could overpay one of these guys to go to San Jose. I mean, Klingberg's a really solid defenseman coming off a bad season where he had an injury, so he wouldn't probably cost too much. Barrie could be signed like a one-year deal there and then be dealt at the deadline. Same sort of thing with Shattenkirk, who isn't overly bad at this point, and while Schultz has declined a little bit, I think he could still fit well. But I think with them looking for some more veteran help, with them having more of a younger blue line, those four could be interesting options if they want the free agent market. If they want the trade market, according to Shangping, guys who could be of interest could be Cody Ceci in Edmonton. We know he's a possible trade candidate, with the Oilers potentially looking to try and free up some cap space. Trevor Van Riemsdyk in Washington, who could be a guy who maybe finds himself on like the outside looking in with all their defensive additions. And White Cloud in Vegas, who probably won't get dealt, but is another guy who seems to be coming up a little bit in trade rumors. So those guys could all be interesting. I think CC would be the most likely one. They would also be able to probably get some sort of an asset to help them into now the CC contract, so that could be an interesting one. Van Riemsdyk and White Cloud would definitely take some pretty good returns, but those two could also be really good second, third pair of defensemen there for the Sharks. So interesting stuff there, but it does sound like, according to Shangpeng, the Sharks are looking for some more defensive help, and whether it be someone on the free agent market like a Klingberg or a Barrie, or someone on the trade market like a Van Riemsdyk or a CC, it does seem like the Sharks are definitely going to be continuing to look this offseason for some more defensive help, so we'll have to wait and see on that. Going over to the LA Kings. Now, according to Eric Stevens of The Athletic, there's a possibility out there that if the LA Kings don't have an overly great start to the 2024-2025 season this year, and by the time it gets to January, February, and we're closing in on the trade deadline, the Kings are not in a playoff position, there is a possibility that the Kings may wind up being sellers at this year's trade deadline. Now, he says that they'll mostly focus on like players who are in the final year of their deals, so he links guys like Vladislav Gavrikov, who's entering the final year of his deal, as a possible trade candidate if the Kings aren't doing overly well. He's got 1 year left at a $5.8 million cap hit. At that point, the Kings could probably retain 50% of his contract, get a really solid return, because Gavrikov's a solid top four defenseman, so he could be a guy who ends up getting moved. Another guy who he links as a possible trade candidate would be Tanner Jeannot, who they recently acquired, also entering the final year of his deal. Solid bomb six forward, can really bring some physicality, really good playoff performer, so that could be a really good pickup there for a team who's looking for some bomb six help at the trade deadline. He also wonders if there's a possibility they could even have conversations with guys like Drew Doughty or Philip Danault if things get really, really bad. Both those guys are on multi-year deals, so it'll be less likely. And Doughty does have an $11 million cap hit, but you gotta think after not having too much playoff success over the past couple of years, they may be open to making some moves. And then maybe the Kings go after a retool or rebuild, trying to build around guys like Byfield, Fiala, Kempe, and players like that. So it'll be interesting to see exactly what happens, but according to a report from Eric Stevens, there's a possibility that the Kings could wind up being sellers if they're not doing overly good at this year's trade deadline, and if so, guys like Gavrikov and Jeannot for sure, but potentially even guys like Danault and Doughty could also be potentially players who are in the rumor mill, so we'll have to wait and see on that. Going over to the Columbus Blue Jackets, we got more reports on a Patrik Laine trade. According to Aaron Portzline of The Athletic, he says that the Jackets are currently looking for picks and prospects rather than NHL roster players in a trade for Laine. Now, I think they may have to take a roster player on, given the contract of Laine and some of these other teams who want him potentially being really tight against the cap, so they may have to make some sort of a move to try and get a roster player as sort of like a cap dump, but they're mostly looking for picks and prospects. So we talked about this recently, how it sounded like it was going to be second round pick plus, so maybe a second round pick and a B-level prospect for a guy like Patrik Laine would wind up being the deal, so it'll be interesting to see exactly what happens. It still sounds like a team like Seattle could have some interest, Minnesota may have some interest. I think teams who are looking for forward help, such as the Islanders, the Flames, Utah franchise, wouldn't be surprised if Montreal as well had some interest. Carolina could have some interest too, so there's a lot of teams out there who I think could definitely benefit from adding a guy like Patrik Laine. According to Aaron Portzline, it sounds like the return needs to be more of a futures-based package to sort of help fill out what they have as like some of their younger players. Like, they have a really young roster, so if they could get some more young players, it could really help them build for the future. They're probably not going to make the playoffs this year, but if they can build right, maybe in the next year or two they could to return to the playoffs. So interesting stuff there for the Blue Jackets, but it does sound like Laine is still possible to get dealt. And according to our reports line, they're looking for a more future-based package and trying to get immediate roster help. So interesting stuff there for the Jackets. And lastly, going over to the Calgary Flames. David Pagnotta was talking about this on one of his recent articles. We talked about this recently about how the Flames really might go down the road of a full rebuild, and that could lead to them moving off some players, and Kadri was one of them. But a lot of people thought that with his no movement clause, Kadri most likely won't go. But according to David Pagnotta, Kadri is open to waiving his no movement clause for the right deal. So it has to be right for Kadri, it has to be right for his family and things like that. But according to David Pagnotta, it does sound like Kadri is open to waiving his no movement clause. Now, it would have to be for the right option. Some people have already been mentioning a team like Colorado could maybe have some interest, but at the point in time, the Avalanche don't have too much cap space, one. And two, Pagnotta does mention that the return to Colorado is most likely not going to happen, so it doesn't sound like it's going to happen there for Kadri going back to Colorado. And he says that sitting more closely to where he was from in London, Ontario, might be somewhere more likely, so a team in the East. So teams over the next year who maybe have some cap space, I don't think the trade will happen right now, but if it could happen at the trade deadline or maybe in next year's offseason, I think is a very likely possibility. So maybe a team who has some cap space and is looking for some offensive upgrades in the East over the next year could definitely look to try and add Kadri. Like, I do wonder about Boston. We know they just acquired Elias Lindholm. Could they try and get Kadri like their number 2C? Could a team like Buffalo try and go after him as like a veteran presence? Could a team like Montreal use him potentially? We know that the Islanders have potentially Brock Nelson coming off books. Could they go after a guy like Kadri? The Jackets could definitely still use some center help. Could they go after a guy like Kadri? There's some other teams out there too could definitely use some center help in the East over the next year. So we're going to have to wait and see on that. But it does seem like, according to Pagnotta, he does say that Kadri is open to waiving his no movement clause if the right deal comes along, and there's a possibility he could be dealt for the Calgary Flames or in the next couple of years. So we'll have to wait and see on that. But that's what we're talking for today. I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts on all this down in the comment section below. What do you think? Does Kadri get moved? Does he waive his no movement clause? And if so, where does he go? If there's a team out there in the East who could definitely use him, which one do you think would most likely try and make a trade for him? What do you think about the Jackets? Do they get a futures-based package of like a second-round pick, maybe a prospect? Or do you think that Laine stays in Columbus for the time being? Or do you think it's more of a roster player that goes back for Laine? Definitely have to get your thoughts on that. What do you think with the LA Kings? Is there a possibility that if they don't do overly well by the deadline, that they start moving off some players such as Gavrikov and Jeannot and potentially Doughty and Danault? Definitely have to get your thoughts on that. Plus, do you think the Sharks are going to add a player before the season starts? So do you think they could add someone on free agency like Klingberg, Barry, or Shanker? Do you think it's more likely to go to trade market and get a guy like TVR or a guy like CC? Definitely have to get your thoughts on that. Plus, what do you think about Evason being new head coach of Columbus? And what do you think about the sign-ups from the past couple days? Definitely have to get your thoughts on all of that down in the comment section below. So I'm going to talk for today. I'm going to like this video. If you like it, subscribe down below. Thank you for your support. We're able to with all of you guys. So if you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe button down below. Don't forget to leave a comment down in the comment section below so you can also discuss today's video. Also, a blog talking about news, rumors, analysis, stuff like that. So if you check that out, I'll leave a link down in the description below, and I can't see you guys all for next video. See you guys soon.